I was molested when I was a teenager, around 13 to 14 years old. I immediately told my dad, but did not convey it properly because I was afraid of him starting a fight. I did not like it whenever someone from my family got into a fight in public. Even now, as an adult at 19 years old, I feel like speaking up about it is still harmful to my image, especially since I am an underweight, skinny guy. Talking about this topic makes me feel like I will turn myself into a huge joke. I do apologize for not replying to all of you. Please know that there are support groups you can talk and vent to. Story 1. Because nobody would have believed that the upstanding man with the kind eyes and a good word for everyone would be capable of such a thing. And because he genuinely was a good person in all other regards, I guess I didn't want to ruin his life and the life of everyone else in our family, so I did my best to block it out, push it down, pretend it never happened. I couldn't be physically near him for 2 years. But then I thought I was fine. I'm not fine, though. I think it caused serious issues that affected all the relationships I was ever in. Story 2, yes, law school professor. After I said no, he lowered my grade from an A to a D. Reported him to the dean, who said, "What am I supposed to do about it?" Edit. I'm an idiot and read this as AskReddit and not Ask Men. I'm a girl. Story 3. When I was 17, I was really into swimming at that time. There was one time after a swimming session at a public pool I used to swim at. I was finishing showering, and a middle-aged man approached me, grabbed my butt, and was about to hug me. No one was around to run to or call for help. I was scared, pushed him away, and ran to the restroom, locking myself inside for hours. After that day, I never swam there ever again. To this day, I have told no one except one of my close friends and this community. Story 4. I was assaulted by a woman. The short story is that I was overprescribed psychiatric medications, crashed at a friend's house, and woke up with her on top of me. I tried to talk to a mutual friend, and his response was to tell me I was lucky because she's so very attractive. He then told her, and she concocted a story where she was the victim. After that, it was over 12 years before I spoke to anyone about it or even admitted it to myself. Story 5. I was raped pretty aggressively when I was in the military. I waited a while to speak up. I was about 5 months from getting out when I realized how much it messed me up emotionally and that I actually needed to talk to somebody and get help. I think I ended up waiting about 4 years. My biggest regret in my life right now is not getting help sooner. It would have gotten me out of a really toxic work environment and helped me escape some tough adult bullying. Hindsight is 2020. All I can do now is move forward. Story 6. When I worked in retail, I was once cornered into a changing room by a woman while her friend stayed outside watching for anybody coming. I was so confused about what was happening that I didn't even realize the woman was trying to take advantage of me. I pushed her off me, and by the time I told my manager, they had left. My manager, being a woman, just laughed it off and said, "Well, they were kind of cute. I was almost raped, but okay." Story 7. I thought it was normal because I had been doing sexual things with other kids ever since a friend of mine of the same age started bringing me into sexual situations when we were in second grade. Story 8. I haven't been, but I had a friend who was essentially blackmailed into sex with a girl he hated. I call that rape. He confided in me and I helped him through it. To me, if you can reverse the genders and it's rape if done to a woman, it's rape when done to a man. He only ever told me because he trusted me and thought everyone else would make fun of him. I hate our society that demands equality but ignores things like this. Story 9. Happened when I was 5. He was a really old man, in his late 60s, who owned a small shop, and kids in the neighborhood used to go buy gum, chips, etc. He was also my grandma's next-door neighbor. He started touching me, and I did not know what was going on, but I knew it was wrong, so I just ran away. I did not tell anyone and never went back to that place again. I even remember telling my sister, she was 7 at that time, and she stopped going too. I knew my parents would not believe me, or maybe they would but would not do anything besides telling me not to go. When I was 15, I finally told my aunt, who had a young daughter and used to go to the same shop, that she needed to be careful and told her what happened. She believed me and no one from my family ever went there again. And a few years ago, he died. I bet he molested a lot of kids, and I feel guilty for not speaking up. My aunt told me he started having mental issues, maybe because of age. When he died, everyone knew that he was sick. I was happy he died. Story 10. My event isn't as serious as some of the stories on here, but it's the only one I have. A couple of weeks ago at my bank, a woman grabbed me while I was talking to the branch manager. I was so shocked that I didn't have anything to say. She just winked at me and started to walk away. The manager saw it and addressed the situation. She told the woman it was unacceptable to behave that way and that she was no longer welcome as a customer. The woman left looking very embarrassed. I was very grateful that someone was willing to stand up for me. If I were by myself, I probably would have been too embarrassed to say anything. Story 11. When I was 20 years old, 4 years ago, I went and had drinks a few houses away from my own with two girls I had known for years. One of them kept giving me drink after drink, knowing I wouldn't say no, and decided to keep trying to grope me in front of the other girl, who just found it funny while I was getting clearly upset by it. I had a girlfriend at the time and explained to her what happened and how disgusted and upset I was about it, but that got turned on me and ended the relationship. I was lucky to have a good group of friends I could surround myself with because that was a really rough patch for me. Story 12. When I was 12 or 13, I tried to speak out about a teacher's aide who rubbed my thigh on 2 occasions. I was told it was just her motherly instinct. I'm older now, and I imagine what would have happened if the roles were reversed. Story 13. As a woman reading this, I am appalled. Even though I know it happens all the time, it hurts to read it. Men and women have been brainwashed forever into believing sexual assault is a joke. It does not matter who it happens to or who does it. It is devastating to the victim. I never reported my abuse. It never even occurred to me. Absolutely nothing would have come of it back then. Story 14. After typing out my story and then deleting it 3 times, I'm realizing this affects me more than I thought. Long story short, a girl who makes a living doing slam poetry about sexual assault sexually assaulted me. I wish people knew the real her and would stop supporting her hypocrisy. Story 15. I woke up one morning to my landlord, an old Colombian lady, with her hand down my shirt, rubbing my chest. I told her to get out of my room. Later, while I was eating breakfast, she came up behind me and started groping me again. I told her to go away. Later that evening, when I came back home from work, she apologized, and I accepted. She was a lonely old lady who spent her days watching Spanish soap operas. I never told anyone, and I never held it against her. Story 16. First time I was under 6. Confused, ashamed, afraid. I didn't know what happened. Much later in life, I woke up to my now ex-wife having her way with me. Technically rape, but it didn't occur to me until I was lucid the next day. At that point, I already wanted to be done with her, so I didn't see a point to it. Back then, I'd never even heard of guys being raped by their wives. It would be like learning that water comes from rocks. Story 17. She was my boss's boss, so it would have caused me more problems to tell her not to speak up. It's not like getting my backside grabbed every now and then was too harmful, just a tiny bit stressful. Story 18. I didn't speak up for years because I was ashamed and believed it was a problem with me. It took literally 30 years for me to be confident enough to get help and admit I had been repeatedly raped as a child. It doesn't make you a bad person or a joke. I had a single bad experience related to speaking out and getting help, but every other person in my life was supportive and kind. Years later, I am perfectly comfortable in my own skin, and I speak out often about male sexual abuse. Story 19. I reluctantly told the police I was raped, and it went to the grand jury 3 times, but the guy got off free. Since then, I have been sexually assaulted. I've told a few people, but not the police because I know it won't go anywhere. Story 20. Didn't understand at 13 what was going on, so had no idea I should report it. Went to therapy in my 30s and realized what happened. Tried reporting it to the police. They asked me why I took so long to report it. Told me it would be a he said, she said situation, so it wasn't worth writing down. Handed me a flyer of women's shelters they gave to domestic violence victims and sent me on my way. At the time, it took all my effort to even try saying something. Things would go very differently now if, I think I'm going to try again. She doesn't deserve to skate on this, and the law has been changed to permit reporting years after. I am doing much, much better than I was, and am much more capable of advocating for myself. Thank you for posting this. Story 21. I'm not sure if I'd necessarily call it sexual assault because it wasn't like I was forced physically, more guilt-tripped when I didn't want to. But yeah, I never told anyone and I don't think I ever will, not gonna lie. Story 22. It didn't dawn on me until years later that I was raped. I was drunk at the club and a guy gave me Xanax. He took me to his place and tried to have sex with me. He used a condom but couldn't finish. He was a friend and I was bisexual. It never registered because I was glad to have the booze, the drug, and a night out. I was in my early 20s. 15 years later, people started to talk more seriously about this stuff, and I realized I was raped. It never affected my life in a negative way. No therapy or anything. I got control of the drugs and everything back in 2011. I turned my life around. I haven't heard from that guy in many years. Story 23. I didn't. Gay man here. I was raped a couple of times before 16. I didn't go to the police because I was worried they'd get my parents involved, and I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want them to say that the rapes led to confusion about my own identity and trying to make sense of what was done to me. If I'm gay and liked it, then it was less of a violation to myself. My parents refused to believe that I was gay when I came out. My mother said she would know if I were gay, and my dad said he didn't raise a gay child. Looking back, I should have gone to the police then, but I still believe it would have made the situation far more complex at a time when I needed support instead of avoiding the scorn of authority figures. Story 24. I was molested a couple of times by girls. One thought I was asleep, and the other just used force. Another tried to humiliate me into sex, daring me and saying I didn't have the courage. It's pretty common, but men don't talk about it. Story 25. Yes, at 16 or 17 years old, I was asked to help move some furniture by someone. I know it was a foolish decision, but he was offering $100. He took me to his apartment building and then grabbed me inappropriately in front of his door. I defended myself and he ran away. I went home, showered for 2 hours, and told my dad. He called the police. The police made me feel foolish, asked if I was a prostitute, and then sent me home on foot in a snowstorm. My dad asked if he could drive me back, but they said no and promised to take me themselves. I really dislike the police now. The guy was caught molesting a younger boy a month or two later. Story 26. I didn't speak about it for nearly a decade. I am not sure what held me from talking, as I knew my family would have been supportive. I believe it was the way society tends to place a stigma on sexual violence survivors. As an adult, I started sharing my experience with my close circle of friends who have been very supportive, and it actually helped me overcome the trauma in many ways. It still haunts me to this day, as it feels as if something had changed deep down in me upon the assault, but I am definitely more confident in this regard. Story 27. I'm 28 now, and when I was 12 to 14, my dad molested me under the guise of teaching me about the birds and the bees. This was after I survived Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 10 years old. I just told my mom and sister about the abuse around Christmas time in 2019. They are both very supportive and have experienced their fair share of assault and abuse from men. I never told anyone because it was my father, and I just didn't understand this wasn't normal. I ended up experimenting with some of my male friends after that time as well and quickly learned I'm straight. For 10 years, I've barely talked to my dad, especially after my parents divorced once I was out of high school. He says he's sorry and it happened to him and he suffers greatly from depression, but I just don't care what he says. It's affected all of my relationships and my interpersonal relationships. I'm finally researching therapists and going to talk to my doctor about medication for my lifelong depression next month. Story 28. I was assaulted by a workmate. It affected me for a while because I was in the middle of work and I turned to my workmate and said, name, sexually assaulted me. And she didn't know how to deal with that situation. It was sort of an aha moment because I kind of put it to the side and then it just blurted out. I don't speak up about it too much because it's embarrassing. Story 29. It wasn't bad. I was staying at a friend's and sharing a bed with another guy staying over. In the middle of the night, this guy was rolling over and grabbing my crotch. I'm like, yo, what the heck? And pushed him off me. I was pretty sure he was asleep while doing it, so I didn't really mind. Maybe he likes to get cuddly when he's asleep. In the morning, I told my friend, the one whose place we were staying at, and then told him in front of people when he also got up and came into the room. It embarrassed him a lot and gave everyone something to think about. Story 30. When I was in the military, I woke up tied to a bed while a girl was riding me. I told my supervisor, my female commander, the base police, and the sexual assault people on base. They all laughed at me, told me not to complain because it's hot, and told me that a man can't be raped by a woman because there is no penetration. Story 31. In my case, I was a 7-year-old boy. I actually didn't know that this was being molested until about 3 years ago at 21 years old. I remember the incident. I told only one friend about it, but I would never tell anyone else. I'm not sure why. It makes me feel pathetic or something, to be honest, so I just hold it in. Story 32. You know when you've had too many Dr. Peppers and you get really drunk and tired and pass out? Then wake up in a strange room with a girl you aren't interested in on top of you having unprotected sex? I followed the procedures. United States Marine Corps. I reported it as I'm supposed to. You know what I was told? Yeah, she's known for doing that. She wants a military baby so bad. That was their response. Yeah, she's a known rapist, but what can you do? She just wants that baby. That was a couple of decades ago. I've tried talking to 2 therapists, and neither believed a man could be raped. I've tried rape victims groups, but it was made clear those were for women only. I've told a couple of people, but you can guess their reactions. All in all, trying to talk about it has been far more traumatizing than the actual incident. I haven't talked about it in over a decade, and my wife doesn't even know. I'm sure she'd be wonderful. I just can't bring myself to talk about it anymore. Like saying the words doesn't happen when I try.